Hi, I'm Lindsay.
Hi, I'm Christy, and we work with Globe International.
Working with missionaries, we hear stories of the struggles, the humor, God's goodness, and a little side of crazy.
Hey, that's who we are.
This is Crazy Missionary Stories.
Hello and welcome to Crazy Missionary Stories. Today we are interviewing Sandy Britnell, who has been a missionary basically all of her life. So she's going to tell us all about that. So to start out, will you tell us a little bit about what you are currently doing on the missions field?
Okay, I'm currently ministering in Nicaragua, and for many years I operated 2 orphanages in 2 different locations in the country and 7 feeding programs. And the feeding programs were in Managua, and they were very effective back in the early, late 90s, early 2000s, and we led a lot of children to the Lord. And some of those children that were at the first feeding program back then are now my full-time employees. Wow. And extremely loyal to me and the ministry, and they got the vision and they love the Lord. So we've had a complication with the government, and although I would have never chosen to shut the orphanages down on my own, God saw fit to do that, and the government came in and took all the kids that were in the orphanage and placed them with basically family members who were really not very happy to have another child because they couldn't feed the ones they have. So it was kind of a heartbreaking situation all the way around. But then God just gave us a new plan. Since we weren't orphanage, we just decided we're going to do a survey and see what the community, especially up in the mountains, what needs were in that community. So we opened, 4 months after they took all the kids, we opened a vocational center. And now we have about 200 children and adults on Saturdays, feeding breakfast and lunch. They learn a skill, English, computers, cosmetology, woodworking, bakery is everybody's hungry, so they all want to learn to make a cake. So that's been super, super effective. And then Fridays are just Bible study and group games, and it's like a big Bible study, prayer, party, and some therapy if they need counseling. And then Saturdays is the adult training, and we operate a daycare center for the single moms on Saturdays. And they bring their kids, and it makes me cry because the kids are all in there coloring, and their mothers have peace because they have their children in a well-protected spot.
So you went from an orphanage to a community center. How many kids were in the orphanage?
30.
And you said 200 kids.
Right. See, this is
come
it.
to this.
Right.
Plus their parents.
Yeah.
And then the moms bring their little children.
Right.
So really, the Lord just exploded the ministry to
right.
something much greater than you ever imagined.
I know. It's so true.
Yeah. What you thought was a tragedy.
It turned out to be, a fast forward footprint of God in the community. We have 3 big communities that we minister in. And we do feeding distributions to the most poor and repair roofs and I will tell you one quick story about the baking class.
Please tell us a story.
We like stories. There was a lady in there that really loved making cakes, but she didn't have electricity in her house. No running water, no electricity, but she wanted to make cakes. And
so can I just ask a quick question?
Sure.
Because I can imagine she probably lives in a shack.
Yeah.
With like tin sides and
or plastic.
A tin roof.
Yep.
So she lives in not even a hut. She lives in just a tiny little
And the
shack.
animals live in there too, the chickens and the little pigs.
With probably a dirt floor.
Yeah, dirt floor.
Okay, so this is her living conditions are really not good.
And so she's trying to figure out how she can bake these beautiful cakes in that environment. So she came to me one day and said, I have made an oven. I have made my own clay oven. And it's a round, you might have seen them in Costa Rica, a round dome, and then she puts the firewood underneath there.
Like adobe type.
Yeah. And I don't know how she regulates the temperature,
But it works.
And the cake, then she showed me pictures of the cakes. They look like something that you would see at Publix.
Oh my goodness.
They're decorated, and they've got all kinds of sprinkle and, designs, and she started selling them. And which is our goal, is to teach them how to make money and not just sit in front of their house and do nothing,
Amazing.
So super proud of her.
That's awesome.
So from the orphanage, Do all of those kids now go to the vocational center?
Some of them do, but the government took some of them way across the country, like to the other ocean. And then some are in places we couldn't find them. But we found about half of them. And they stay in touch. They stay in touch with our leadership. And a lot of the girls have babies now. No husbands, but they have babies. So that's a little heartbreaking. But this is the way they do things there. So I'm okay with that. Now I bring baby clothes in when I go over.
Which you probably didn't have to do before.
No. Well, when we had the baby orphanage, we were bringing in stuff like that all the time. But I just want them to know we haven't left them. That even though they're 20, 21 now, some of them, we're still with them. And help their life be better.
You have a rich life full of stories, I'm sure, because you were actually raised on the mission field.
I was.
And I'm curious, were you born on the mission field?
No.
Or do you remember going?
Some of my siblings were born there in Colombia. I remember going. I was a young preteen.
Okay.
But I remember the process of my parents feeling the call to missions.
Where did you grow up in Alabama? Where did you grow up?
No, all over.
Okay.
Dad went to Bible college in Canada. Actually, I went to the same one years later.
In Canada, eh?
Yeah. Cold, eh? You go from the equator
What part of
to
Canada?
Alberta,
In Alberta.
Close to Calgary.
Okay.
It's a classic old Bible college that.
And you went there too then?
Yeah,
Wow.
because it was very strict,
Okay.
and my dad raised me in the jungle, and he didn't want to send me to UCLA or something. Not that I would want to do that.
Yeah.
So he said, "You're going up there to Canada, and you're going to graduate with your degree in theology, and in a very protected,
You knew
strict,
you'd be okay.
Yeah. What was the question again?
If you remember going to the mission field, kind of how you got there, just kind of wondering.
We also have missionary kids. I mean, within
yeah.
Globe International, and every missionary family that goes out, their kids. And so I'm just curious what that was like for you, what it looked like, kind of how you got where you were. Because I didn't know if you were raised there. How many kids were in your family?
6, and I'm the oldest.
Kids.
Yeah.
I did not know that. I'm from 6 as well.
Oh,
and you're from, how many are in your?
4.
4, okay. I'm just thinking bigger families.
Can't keep up with you guys. You were talking about how you remember the process of your parents feeling
Yes.
the call.
So Dad graduated from Bible college up in Canada. It was called Prairie Bible College. And then they asked him to be on staff. And so he was a telephone guru, back in the day. And so we stayed there an extra year and a half up there, and it was nice because we got a lot of free food. And when he was a student, we were so poor, really poor, and kind of hungry all the time, which prepared us for the jungle because we were really hungry out there. So they asked him to install this new telephone system. So he did that. He came to Indiana, I think, and took apart a whole town, and then took it up to Canada, installed it in all the buildings and the staff. And then when he finished that, we thought, well, we're ready to go to the mission field. So started thinking, he wanted to go to Regions Beyond Missionary Union. He had a friend, I got his book in there, a good friend, I can't remember his name right now, that was with Regions Beyond, but he only had 3 children, and we had 5 at the time, or 4. And they turned Dad's application down because of too many kids.
Too many kids.
Yeah. Yeah, I don't think they do that anymore, but back in the day, if you had too many kids, it was a liability, I guess. So then he started researching New Tribes Mission, and they will take you could have 10 kids, but you have to go to the jungle, or go to a remote location. So they applied there. I remember them fasting and praying, Mom and Dad fasting and praying for 3 days. And we were big into family meetings. Sit around the table, we're going to have a family meeting. And Dad said, well, Mom and I have prayed, and we really think the Lord wants us to go with New Tribes Mission. And at first we were headed to New Guinea. And then I remember the day the letter came in the mail and said, we're opening up Colombia. We don't have any missionaries in there yet. You would be the first missionary family in there. And would you be willing to move there and and spearhead our efforts in the tribe with the tribal people of Colombia. And another family meeting, and we're like, yay. My brother, who I'll tell a story about later, but he was 2.5 years younger than me, he could not wait to get to the jungle. I mean, he pictured himself spearing fish and shooting and
Sounded adventurous.
oh man, climbing banana trees and coconut, and he did all those things.
So how were you feeling like leading up to it as a preteen?
Mm-hmm.
That's like a crazy time of your life.
Yeah.
I can't imagine moving during that time, much less moving to the
To
jungle.
the jungle. Yeah. I think God just gave us all grace. And I really kept my eyes on my parents. I didn't see fear in my mom. And my mother was a model in Knott's Berry Farm. She would dress up in the old antique Western, I mean, everything was very discreet, the big dresses, not the saloon dresses. But so she was a little prissy, beautiful, tall, thin. But man, she stepped up to the plate.
She wasn't scared of going to the jungle.
Man, and she had to put up with a lot. We all got malaria, and she knew all this. She knew that there was a risk. So I watched them, and I just had peace, and I was kind of, the kids call me the third parent, the little
oldest,
ones.
yeah.
I'm the third parent. Yeah. And so I wanted to be a good example for them too.
Wow.
So I think I was ready.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
And that's really smart for your age to just focus on your parents.
Yeah.
And they're not scared, so I'm not scared.
I'm not scared. A couple times Mother passed out, because she couldn't find anything she liked to eat.
Oh, no.
So we found some boiled eggs and
While you were in Colombia.
yeah, when we first got there. But they just handled it beautifully.
Wow. So what part of Colombia did you guys go to then?
So we landed in Bogota, and then we went.
Were there crazy ways that you had to get into the place that you were going to?
Yes.
Did you go by boat or
Yep,
canoe
yep.
or what?
Big
Maybe
truck.
walk us through that. What was
Okay.
that like when you moved down there and got in there?
To get to the jungle, we had to take a truck across a savanna. It was loaded with chickens, onions, potatoes, all supplies. Because
There was transporting.
That was stinky. It was okay when we were moving, but when we stopped, it caught up with you.
You arrived with the smell of...
It's just bad. So we were in that truck for, I think, 5 days across the savannah.
5 days?
Yeah, and my brother, Randy, the one younger than me, he contracted a really bad strain of malaria in that savannah area. So then we
So
get
just hot and humid, I'm guessing.
yeah,
then.
hot and
Okay.
humid. Hmm. And it was hard to find food because we'd stop somewhere and need some food, and they would go start chasing the chicken down, So it was funny. I'm like, that's awfully fresh. I don't know. I'd rather buy chicken at the grocery store. But anyway, so we get to the Orinoco River, and they had sent the tribal people from Venezuela that were working with the New Tribes missionaries in Venezuela, sent a barge. Well, it was like 3 giant canoes with a pole across. You might have seen this, a pole across all 3 of them, and they were tied together. And then they had a couple of engines on the back. And we loaded all the stuff in there, the chickens and the onions and canned goods and everything. We ate a lot of Spam back in those days. And we loaded it all in there, got in the boat, and it was like a 2-day travel time to the village. They had identified a village that really wanted us there, and that were going to build us a house there. And I think the house was ready for us when we got there, or almost ready.
So, sorry, 2 days on the boat?
I was going to ask
Did
about
you-
that day and night.
Wait, did you stop anywhere? How did you
So
go
there
to
was
the
a
bathroom?
storm. Well, that was
That's what I'm
you
wondering.
had to get in the water,
You what?
Oh.
jump in the water.
Oh.
There was no bathrooms.
So you learned just to deal... I mean, you
That's
literally
just
jumped
like-
on in.
yeah.
I mean,
Well,
you guys just...
They tried to stop at a sandbar for us, pull up at a sandbar and let us do our thing. And then we did, at night, we did sleep on a sandbar with poles in here.
No
and a hammock.
crocodiles, no alligators.
Well, there were, but I don't think that didn't bother. What we had a lot of was piranha.
And you had to get in the water,
Yeah.
in that water, and go to the
The
bathroom.
bathroom.
Good luck. Pray,
Yeah.
pray.
I didn't think it through at the time.
good thing.
And the Indians did that, and so My mother did, so okay.
So you did it. See, again, your eyes were
Right,
on your
yeah,
parents.
Yeah, and the last night we were on the boat, we had to go through some rapids. And my dad knew that, but the missionary from Venezuela, who will remain nameless, I don't even think he's still alive, said, no, we're going to push on through these rapids. I know the way, these Indians, and it's dark at night. And because he wanted to it was only a couple hours to get to our final place.
He was ready to get home.
He wanted to get, well, he wasn't, that wasn't his home, but he wanted to get this trip over with and get back to Venezuela.
Okay.
Who can blame him? So we just about sank. All the toilet paper that we brought got wet.
Oh, no.
Everything, it was a wind and storm, and they're trying to, and then the flashlight they couldn't see the rapids, and the wind was blowing. And at one point, I was fine until the flashlight panned across my father's face.
And you saw he was scared.
Yeah, his lips were white, and he was going to lose his whole family. Yeah. Richard was 3. But they finally pulled over, got to the shore, and tied up there, and we just slept on the boat. And
that was your entrance into
that was a lot of drama. And we had only landed in Colombia 2 weeks before this. We didn't even, we didn't have any orientation, or there were no missionaries there to help us transition.
Sink or swim.
Yeah, exactly. But then when we got to the village, the tribal people were so happy to have us and so accommodating, and they were bringing us fish. They made the most delicious roast fish night in the back of their little huts, and every day we got food: bananas, fish, pineapple, and tapioca pudding comes from yucca. They would make tapioca pudding, the little beads, and then mother would cook it, and it was a kid's paradise especially for my brother that wanted to spear fish.
So can I ask a question?
Sure.
Maybe this is really ignorant, but can you explain what the tribal people look like? Because I have my own idea from National Geographic or whatever.
Yeah.
What was that like?
Well, this particular tribe was a Puinavi tribe, and they had long since stopped killing and eating other tribal people. But that was going on farther interior, and Dad did make a contact.
Tribes.
Yeah, warring tribes. And they didn't look Mayan, they just had, I don't know, I never thought about it. It just looked like tribal people.
So what kind of clothes did they wear?
They wore regular clothes.
Oh, okay.
They made their own clothes. As we stayed longer, we went to places where they didn't wear clothes.
But these people
these people, they had sort of been semi-evangelized by a older single missionary woman who traveled up and down.
Really?
Yeah, Sophie
Was
Mueller.
she American, or was she?
She was an artist from New York City. And
Wow.
so she would come. So she was already there. So she did a lot of evangelism up and down, just her and the tribal people. And so she taught them. They had to cover up and be modest, and did a lot of evangelism and did some translation too.
Can I ask her name?
Sophie Mueller.
Sophie Mueller. Mm-hmm. That's just I'm kind of flabbergasted just thinking the power of one life.
Yeah,
one woman by herself.
Teeny tiny little lady.
Imagine going into what you guys went through. She somehow had to get there by herself.
Well, she made good contacts with tribal leaders, and they would take her where she wanted to go, and
that's incredible.
Give her food.
That's God.
But she didn't stay with us. She was just traveling. I think she had 8 different tributaries that she went up and down.
So she kind of opened the way, and found who the receptive people were.
Right.
Really.
That's exactly.
And then you guys came in. And families would come live there. And,
right. Eventually, we had 100 families in Colombia, and they made Dad the president of the whole organization.
100 North American families
yes,
as missionaries? Okay.
Canadians and Americans.
Okay.
And they were in 8 or 10 tribes, and did really amazing until the drug situation happened.
Did you speak the language?
There was a few people that spoke a little Spanish, and we just scrambled around to learn Spanish.
You didn't know Spanish at that point?
Mm-mm.
None of you?
I think Mom and Dad had a 6-month course, but and Mother never. Honestly, my mother was so focused on her family and food and the next meal and the laundry.
Yeah.
Well, I did the laundry on the rock at the river. Yeah, that was yeah. We had to wash hammocks. You know, hammocks are really
Heavy.
cumbersome.
Yeah.
Yeah. So she didn't really. She was not immersed in the language, and she just took care of her family. And our home was always, we had curtains on the mud walls. You know, there's mud wall. She made it home, and there was rugs on the mud floor. And she cooked for 2 years on a little Coleman camping stove for the whole family, 2-burner. And it was just challenging. Had to carry water.
Yeah, daily life just takes time when you have to do stuff like that.
Yeah. There was no running water. Dad eventually did fix up barrels.
So what was the house like? Tell us what the house
The first house we were in didn't even have screens on the windows. And we just all slept in hammocks. And
Inside the house?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And then there was a supply boat that came up and down our river. And they would bring us, Dad would order on the ham radio. He would say, bring me 3 rolls of screen and whatever. And so then he got screens on the window. He was very practical. Just a super missionary. He'd fix anything. And he helped fix the house up so it was comfortable for everybody. But then the tribal girls, little girls, were never taught to read or write. And they didn't know how to add, or even like a 12-year-old or 15-year-old. So I asked my dad, I said, what about, we've got this building here, over here, and what about if we start a little school for the tribal girls? And
How old would you have been?
maybe
This was right
13, yeah.
Wow.
And so we did. We had a great time, and it was so crazy because they didn't speak Spanish, and I didn't really speak Spanish.
Well, they spoke their own
They spoke Puinave, and I learned a little bit of that. But then I thought they really need to learn Spanish. I mean, we all need to speak Spanish and learn to read in Spanish and write in Spanish. The problem with the tribal people is that the Colombian nationals will come down the river and buy stuff from the tribal people and cheat them. Made me so angry. I was so indignant because they didn't know how to add. And
So
they take real advantage of them.
Wow.
And so I saw that and I thought, we can fix this. All the while I was...
As a child.
Yeah. And I was... I had to do high school by correspondence, which was super challenging because you just...
By mail?
By mail. And we got mail once every 6 months.
Oh my goodness.
So, and I had a little candle.
So you could finish a course and yet not know if you actually
Well, and
passed it.
I didn't do well at all in algebra and geometry. So, because I got all my exams back and they were all, big red. You have to do the whole course.
How long
over
did
again.
it take for you to get the results back?
It's so laborious.
Can you imagine?
Oh, I finally graduated, but it was terrible. I didn't really want to graduate because I knew once I was done with high school, I would have to go to college, and I didn't want to leave the jungle. Didn't want to leave my family. I was super attached to my family. But I did make it through. I got a diploma. I'm very proud of it.
You worked hard.
I worked for hard with Kendall because I was teaching the kids during the day.
You started a little school.
Yeah, we've got a picture somewhere of it. There's all these little girls, like maybe 30 little girls, and then my little brother Richard, who was little, standing there with all the girls on the front of the lines, like, I'm going to learn something here too. Super cute.
So did you all learn Spanish then? They learned Spanish too?
Yeah.
Now, as far as what your dad was doing, then was he church planting or what was he doing? I mean, I imagine just living amongst the people, getting to know them more.
That was what's so impressive to me as a child is that he didn't just preach. We had it was called culto, C-U-L-T-O. It's still a word, right?
Yeah,
and we called it that in the jungle.
That's what like a church service would be, the el culto.
Oh, culto, yeah. So we had that every night. And Sophie Mueller started that. She knew that nighttime could be a problem.
Problem as far as like spirits.
Yeah,
things like that,
or mischief. And so
Okay.
she thought that it would be good to have everybody get together every night
keep them busy.
and sing, 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 sing. And it was so funny because she had a little songbook. It's called Songs of Challenge. And then they had it translated into English. I think I have it at my
It's like
at
a
my
hymnal
house.
or something.
It was a little paperback songbook. So the Indians kept theirs in their huts, and then every night they would come to the kuldo, and
where was this meeting place? What was
it was in the village, in the middle of the village.
just like a park or something? Or
No, the village was built in a circle.
all the huts were around.
Around in a circle, and then they would historically put the little church in the middle of the plaza, and the opening, and then everybody would come from their huts and come into the church with their hymnal.
So they're actually in a church building.
Well, the men got to sit on poles. The women sat on the dirt.
So was it just like a thatched roof?
Yeah, it was all
So it
mud.
wasn't enclosed.
No,
it was
no.
really just covered over.
Well, some of them closed it in. The first one was just open.
Okay.
When we first got there, but they would come in with their little song books, and the first people that got there were already halfway through the song, but the new people had to start from the beginning. So nobody was singing together. It was
And it wasn't like they were singing around or like
no.
it was not flowing together well.
It was most horrible noise you've ever heard. But they had to start from the beginning because
And they never just joined in.
No.
They always started.
they had to, and then
And people didn't come at the same time.
No. And so when you got there, you start on that song, and then you sing it through, and then you start on the next song, and then
They
everybody
never waited for
no,
each other?
No, they didn't.
And they sang through the whole.
Well, or maybe 4 songs or something.
So they sang, and then your dad would share the word.
Right. Yeah. Dad
It was like a small church service every night.
Yeah.
How
every
long
night.
did it last?
Too long, because I would hold babies that didn't have diapers on,
Oh,
and in the dirt, because I loved babies, and so yeah.
It ended up kind of muddy.
Yeah. But I do want to say one thing about the ministry back in the day. We did a lot of conferences. Like every 6 months, the tribal people in this region would gather at a central meeting place, and they would come on these big canoes with about that much room, clearing the water. And there's children on there.
You mean the canoe is like
Sunken in.
until there's just
Yeah,
that much
like an
space from the
inch.
top for it to
Yeah.
just flood over?
And everybody just sat real still, and
They packed as many people literally as they could.
Everybody wanted to come to the conference, and it was like probably 3 days, and Dad taught, and so funny. He had to find people who understood Spanish, and then they had to be able to translate into their tribal language. Then he had to find somebody that could speak that tribal language and the next language.
Wow.
And I remember counting, I hope, my memory. I remember he had to go through 9 different translations to get everybody covered, every tribal covered, language covered.
So he would say something and then they would all
In 9
translate.
And then
languages.
it would take a while.
Go down
Yeah.
the line.
Yeah, it took a while.
So, 9 times as long as it
And
might
who
take
knows
just
what
for
the
you.
last one was saying.
Yeah,
like
right.
how-
Like the book.
Yeah, it's like the game. But people got saved.
Well,
And
that's the important thing.
I was the counter. I don't know why that was important to
all
me.
the heads that
No, the
were-
counter of the people who got saved.
Oh, okay.
That went forward, to receive the Lord. And then at the end of every conference, the 3 days, there was a baptismal. All the new believers that wanted to, then they would have a baptism meeting. Dad would teach on baptism, and it was translated. And then I remember one year we had 64 new converts got baptized. But the river was low that year, the Orinoco. We might have been on a tributary at that point, but it was real low and it was real swift. So Dad would get out there with the new believers, but they had to have catchers down.
Not because they were falling in the spirit.
No, it
because
was
the river would carry them.
and they did. They got away. They would get away. and people would drag them out. And I remember one year, and they still wanted to be baptized in spite of that. Who cares? This is important stuff, right? One year they had 6 catchers. I'm like, is it that? Is it really that swift? And it really was, But Dad always kept his balance. I don't know.
Wow.
So anyway, it was super.
I'd love to see a video of that.
Incredible. Can you imagine? The catchers are downstream.
Watch out! Here comes another one. But they would baptize him and then sing a hymn after.
They baptized one person,
and then they sing a hymn.
That took a little while.
Oh, wow.
Oh yeah.
How many people do you remember getting saved, like at a time at those conferences?
It was like 30, 40 a night.
And how often did you guys do those?
Every 6 months.
Every 6 months.
Yeah.
So people would come, not because they knew the Lord, but they wanted to be a part of what was going on.
Right. Yeah.
Wow.
And then I think we provided food for them, or I think every tribe brought stuff, and they just everybody ate together.
Do you remember seeing that? I was in Mozambique one time for a pastor's conference, and I remember seeing them come in literally with a pole, and there was like animals tied to it because they were bringing their own food.
Yeah.
And was it like that?
Yeah. Like wild boar and lots of fish. They like to smoke monkeys.
Oh.
Which I don't know if you've ever seen a smoked monkey.
No.
Yeah.
Seems kind of sad.
It was. I was not eating that, that's for sure. Nor was my mother. But anyway, they brought their own food and their own cassave. It's a yuca bread that they make, a big flat bread, and tasted like cardboard and dirt.
Oh.
We were not big fans.
It was probably very filling.
Yeah, that's right. Swells up in your stomach. But the thing that impressed me about my dad, that's where I was going with this, is that he loved to teach the word and had leadership training at every conference. The leaders from every tribe had special meetings with Dad and translators, and he just was so loving to them. But the other thing that I really appreciated about both he and Mom is that they preached the gospel with their lives, not just with their mouth. They lived it. They lived it. They lived serving. They lived giving. Dad had to deliver babies, and he was an electrician, and just very giving and kind and.
So I imagine the culture of the tribe was very communal. What was that like for your family? I mean, you said you were up in Canada where it's cold. I'm just thinking of warm climate, cold climate cultures. Like, what was that like for you guys? Was that a pretty steep learning curve immediately being immersed into
we were
a culture?
on the equator. Smithsonian Institute came by in a big barge and said, you're exactly 7 miles from the equator.
Wow.
And Richard goes, I want to go see it. Let's go look at it.
There's actually going to be
There's a line right there. So it was, the heat was oppressive.
That sun is hot.
But it was. But every day at 4, there was a little caño. That's a little creek. Okay. A little creek out behind our village. And we would all pack up our towels and soap and trudge to the creek. It was quite a hike. And then get in the creek. Well, we had to bathe with all our clothes on.
Yeah.
That was another Sophie Mueller rule. You don't bathe without your clothes on. So that was something to get used to. But the creek was cool. And then by the time we got back to our house, it was getting dark. It was like 5:30 or 6. It gets dark at the same time every day. And Mother had made chocolate. There's a chocolate that we got from Venezuela. It's called toddy. And eventually we got a refrigerator. And so we had ice, which was super exciting. And it was a kerosene refrigerator.
Oh.
So, yeah, I love the ice. And we would put ice in glasses and then the chocolate milk and have graham crackers. And it was a party.
Wow.
So did people come into your house all of the time? Or
no, they came and stood at the windows. Okay. They didn't feel, so you're never really alone.
Oh, no.
Yeah.
Well, we had a little outhouse, so we were alone out there. But they like to watch us. It's like that's their entertainment.
Like TV.
Yeah. Let's go see what the Americans are doing now.
Crazy
What are they
Americans.
eating?
Wow. So I'm curious, like, I don't want to miss any of this stuff. I hope it's okay to go into all this detail, but it's fascinating to me. So what was a day in the life of your family like? So, I mean, you said you wash clothes on a rock.
At the river.
At the river.
So it's a lot of volcanic rock down there.
So it would be high.
Yeah. Well, it was kind of slant. Depends on the time of year.
Okay.
But yeah, I tried to get down there between when the mosquitoes went to bed and before the gnats came out.
Which would be more or less.
Dawn.
Oh, goodness.
Wow.
And then take a big thing of laundry and
For 8 people.
Well, Shelley hadn't been born yet.
Okay.
At that point, she always lived. When Dad was president, they lived closer to civilization, and he flew in and out of the tribe.
And when you say they, you must have been in college at that point then?
Yes,
Okay.
I was.
Okay.
I was in college.
Okay.
Sadly. So I would do the laundry early. Mother would make breakfast, and then I had school for several years, with the little tribal girls. And then there was always chores, for a while we had to carry all of our water from the creek.
In buckets, or how did you do that?
Buckets.
Okay, and I'm just, another detailed question. When you, did you carry a bar of soap with you to wash the clothes
Yes.
on the rock? Or
Yeah.
how- okay.
Yeah. They were
So
big bars
you
of soap.
scrubbed,
Right.
and then you had to dip them in the water and rinse it off.
And squeeze them.
And squeeze it. And how long did that take you in the morning? Before you had to go back for breakfast? and get ready
Yeah,
for
about
school?
an hour and a half. And this is, one of my siblings are going to be watching this. Some of them went to bed.
Okay. Well, they were little. I mean,
They were little. That's right. So the hammock was an issue, because they were big,
How
heavy.
old would you have been at this point?
Probably 13, 14. Yeah, it was hard to get back up. And sometimes the tribal people would come and help me. Some of
Did they
the
also
ladies.
do their laundry at the same
Yeah.
place?
Well, they in different times of the day, but
Okay.
but they knew I was down there, and so they would come down and help me, which was awfully sweet. Yeah.
Wow, so they looked out for you.
They really did. It was I don't know why I was so surprised, but they really cherished us as a family. And Richard, when we got there, he figured out that if he went to their homes, they would feed him.
So he'd go visit.
He would go visit, and he would
Smart
disappear
guy.
for hours. And somebody would say, "Has anybody seen Richard, Ricardito?" And I'll go find him, and there he'd be sitting in there playing with somebody's chicken in their house, or and then eating.
He just made himself at home.
Oh, and they loved him. He was bright blonde hair, super cute. So yeah, the rest of us, they brought food to us. We didn't go in their houses.
You have a pretty crazy story that you could share with us, and just seeing God move.
Yeah, I have several, but the one that comes to mind is, now I have 2 brothers. One's Randy, just younger than me, and then Richard's quite a bit younger than me. But when I was a sophomore in college up in Canada, I got a call from somebody, a New Tribes representative in the United States, and they said, "Sandy, we have some bad news for you, and we just want to know if you've got people with you right now."
Wow.
And I was actually at a staff member's home with one of my friends, and so they were very close to Mom and Dad when Dad was going to college there. They said that the thing is, your brother has been missing in the jungle for 4 days. He had gone out to hunt an ocelot. I have another ocelot story too, but for another day. He'd gone out to hunt an ocelot, and he had borrowed a gun from the missionary that he was out in the jungle helping build his house.
Okay.
It was a single guy, and Randy had gone with him to help build the house with him. And he borrowed his rifle. He had 3 bullets. Bullets were really scarce. It was a big deal to get a bullet. You really wanted to use your machete as often as possible. But
How old would Randy have been at that time?
he 15 or less. Okay. But he had lived in the jungle, and he was pretty sharp, but he was an American kid, and battled with malaria. So he had been gone for 4 days, and he'd left the village early in the morning and gone out to kill this ocelot. The way you get an ocelot is you kill a monkey and lay it down, and the ocelot comes and eats it, and then you shoot the ocelot. So he had limited bullets. So he shot the monkey. He knew he'd hit him, but the monkey kept hopping from treetop to treetop. And so he lost the trail. Thought, well, how bad can that be? I'll find the trail. And he wandered around, round and around and round, with no food, no water, 8 days. And so after 4 days, the mission organization decided they better let me know. And so, I was at a very strongly Christian Bible college. And the student body said, we're stopping classes. We're going to pray for Randy.
Wow.
Randy's going to be fine. He's going to walk out alive. And so for 4 days, they did do classes, but they had constant prayer meetings going on.
Wow.
And the funny thing is he used his bullets. I could be wrong. I hope he's not going to watch this, because he probably want to correct me. But he shot, I think, a snake, or maybe an anaconda, and something else, a wild boar, but he couldn't cook it. So he was trying to eat raw dead fish in the creek, or puddles or whatever. But anyway, he finally, at the creek, followed the creek down, and it led back to the river. The river from which he had left 8 days before.
Wow. And
he swam, crazy guy, swam across to a sandbar, holding the rifle above, because it was a borrowed rifle. You don't want to get that wet. Swam over to the sandbar, laid on the sandbar, and started yelling. He could see his village from the sandbar.
Really?
So he had wandered around in a big circle like that.
Oh my goodness.
So he started yelling, but all the village people were out in the jungle looking for him.
Nobody was at home.
There was like 3 old ladies in the village, and he kept yelling, "Are you the man? Are you the man?" And they came paddling out to the sandbar, rolled him in the canoe, and took him to the middle of the plaza, put him on a mat, and there was no radios or anything. So my dad was out there looking for him, and they had actually. The Colombian army had been flying planes over.
Oh my goodness!
Wow. So they really do get a lot of people involved.
Yeah, but the jungle was so thick, there was just no way they could see him. Yeah. They could see the village, but they couldn't see Randy. So they had a plan, and they were very organized. They had grids that they did through the village and through the jungle. And Dad said, "Now you tell me if you find him, dead or alive."
Wow.
And everybody was cool with that. He got out there at the end of the 4th day, when Randy had been missing 4 days. They didn't tell him right away either. They didn't tell Dad. The missionary did not tell Dad. So when Dad found out, that's when they called me in Canada. They let him in the middle of the plaza on a mat, and started calling, "Don Orlando, we've found your son." But they didn't say if he was dead or alive. And Randy told me later, he said, Dad came up, rushing up to me, and saw that I was still alive. And he said, Dad, I'm so sorry. Please don't be mad at me. He said, I brought the gun back. After the 4th day of looking for him, the tribal people would not go back out to look for him anymore, because they said, we don't even last after 4 days in the jungle. And this is an American boy.
Wow.
So we're not going. And so Dad had to ante up and say, whoever finds him, dead or alive, gets an outboard motor. And that was like a gold mine.
Wow.
So he
knew what to put on the table.
That's right. That's what you offer a tribal guy or woman. So they were all out on it, and that's why there was nobody in the village after the 8th day. On the 8th day.
Wow.
And so everybody came rushing back in. Somebody radioed the Colombian National Guard or whatever, and they brought a helicopter in to get him out. But the tribal people had never seen a helicopter. And so when it landed in their little plaza, they all ran into the jungle. They said, there was this horrible bird. Horrible bird landed in our village. And
wow.
The fun end of the story here is he went back to that same village a year later. He was in the hospital for quite a while, lost 33 pounds.
Oh my goodness.
And he had, there was a fly in the jungle that lays, you might have that.
Got a human botfly.
Yeah. It lays an egg under your skin, but you can't get it out.
And it just becomes this big old lump. You
Yeah,
can feel it
yeah.
until the fly comes out.
But you can't cut it out early. Another thing that he got was leishmaniasis, and I'm not even sure where that came from.
What is that?
It's some kind of a skin disease. And he still got the scars. He says, these are my chick magnets.
Yeah, he's got stories.
He's got more stories than I do. But it was in the newspaper in Bogota, and the American boy survives 8 days in the jungle. It's a big deal. But that was the most amazing answer to prayer, because once I found out the tribal people don't last
More than 4 days.
more than 4 days, I remember just crying and crying and thinking, I'm so sorry I was mean to Randy.
Oh, you were repenting.
I was repenting. If you just let him come back, God, I'll be nice to him. He was my biggest problem when I was babysitting. Mom and Dad would be out the door. You're not the boss of me. So, but then when it got back to my student body, we announced it at lunch the next day. Everybody just stood up with their trays, their food trays, and hit their fork or spoon on it and clapped and just
Praise God.
it was a real, and there's people praying all over the United States. In fact, we still run into them. Are you the one that got lost in the jungle?
Wow.
So he's pretty famous in some circles.
Yeah.
But anyway, a year later, he went back to that village real quick, and the tribal people were like watching him.
Leave.
Yeah. So when he went off to the jungle, into the woods to go to the bathroom, they were all with him. They wouldn't leave him alone.
couldn't trust that
That's
guy.
right.
Get
You
lost.
got to watch him. So the outboard motor went to the whole village, and they with the agreement that they would share it, and so it turned out good for them.
That's incredible.
That is crazy. Well, you told us to remind you to tell us about some kind of tribe.
The Maku.
Yes.
Yes.
So can you tell us a
Sure.
little bit about
Sure.
that?
The Maku were very violent, non-trust white people tribe that did not wear clothes, and they were cannibals and really mean to outsiders. In fact, Randy ran into, when he was lost those 8 days, he ran into some of their shelters because they were nomadic, and they would build a tentative shelter, and he was hoping he would find them because
Well, if they're cannibalistic.
I know, don't
why
go
would you
there.
wanna find that?
Well, he thought they might have something to eat. It might be him. So,
Oh my goodness.
a few years later, Dad was the president then, and he said, God wants that tribe evangelized. We're going to go out there.
Your dad said this.
Yeah, we're going to go out there and lead that tribe to Christ. And it was a big thing for like maybe 15 years.
Wow.
Out there. And they built an airstrip so they could get the little MAF plane in there, Missionary Aviation Fellowship. And they put a little hut out on the airstrip so that the missionaries could come out there and stay. And then they would hang gifts on the edge of the airstrip. Like, I don't know why they would hang an axe out there or a machete, but they then
But
one
that was the gift.
yeah, that was a gift, and that was to show them the goodwill of the missionaries, and they would hang food or whatever. And one time, Randy thought he was super funny, and he hung a pair of his underwear out. So the next time see what I mean? He was a problem. The next time they came out a little bit into the clearing, one of them had his underwear on his head. It's like, this is how you wear these. So anyway, they eventually contacted that tribe with the gospel. They finally broke them down, and they knew they were friends. So at one point, about 20 of the men, totally naked, painted, and approached the missionaries. Dad was there because they rotated every 3 months, and they put new missionaries out there because it was really tedious.
That hard.
Yeah. So they came out and they wanted to paint the missionaries. So we've got pictures of Dad with some of the paint on them. And the missionaries made popcorn for them and Kool-Aid. Then that was the beginning of the ice breaking. And fast forward, years later, that tribe, Malku tribe, is sending out their own missionaries to reach more indigenous people farther back in the jungle. I'm super proud of my dad for hearing the Lord on that.
And persisting.
Yeah, and it was not, that contact, they call that a contact. That was not easy because sometimes they would wake up and I have some poison darts at the house. I was going to bring some.
Do you really?
Yeah. I hide them from the grandkids because they're fascinated with them.
I bet.
But they're a long, thin, you shoot them out of a blowgun, a long 8-foot blowgun. And I think it must be bamboo stock.
I was going to ask if that would be bamboo, like a tiny bamboo, not a big bamboo, a small.
Right. And then you put this tiny thin, the poison dart is about like this big around or less. And then it has white, not fabric, but some kind of twine or some jungle material. But it's white.
Like fibrous.
It's fiber, right.
What's the poison they put on it?
It doesn't kill you. It just paralyzes you. So that then they can approach the animal and kill it themselves. But Dad said they got up one morning and they looked out of they were in the middle of this little area, clearing, and the whole clearing was white. The tribal people had shot that many poison darts to threaten the missionaries to get out.
Wow.
We do not want you here. Look what could happen to you. And they had a couple of chickens. They brought a couple of chickens down with them. And one was named Matilda, anyway. But the tribal people started to charge one day. They charged the hut. And they let Matilda go and took their gun and killed Matilda in front of
to show them that they could kill her.
Yeah.
Oh, wow.
That was sent a signal out there. Stuff like that happened all the time, and it took years for this to happen.
So they would go in, they'd fly in, they'd stay in a hut on that area where they had the landing strip, and they just stayed there. That's it. And then they'd leave again. That was kind of them trying to take the beachhead, let's say.
That's right.
Just get in and get a place, or get a foothold somewhere on the territory.
But the thing
is, that's how that went.
That's how it went. But they had to first walk in for a couple of years to build the airstrip, to the clearing, because it was all done with machetes, and it was thick jungle, and those guys worked.
So when you
say
hard, an airstrip, so they had to first clear it, then they probably had to take all the stumps off or whatever that. Yeah. So it was just a dirt landing strip. It wasn't.
Yeah, it was kind of. I didn't ever fly in there. I was never invited, but I would have said no anyway. But because those little aircraft are, this little Cessna, single engine. But yeah, they would go in and out. There was a way to get in by foot too, and over to the river. But these guys were super remote, so they decided they wanted an airstrip, and they just flew in and out that way. And then they designed a way for the pilot to drop packages of food. So they designed this big ball that you could put, canned goods or flour or powdered milk or whatever they wanted.
I imagine this is before they actually were able to land. They were still trying to make
but they had to have food. So I remember Dad trying to design that one night when we lived in civilization. He said, we're going to figure out a way where we can get eggs dropped from there.
And he was able to do it?
Wow.
Yeah. Wow. I don't know. I don't remember. I was kind of like, really, Dad?
But if he could make it so drop it from a plane, then the eggs don't break. That's incredible.
Right. That's right.
Wow.
I think eventually they cracked the eggs and put them in Tupperware or something, and dropped them that way. But anyway, they did contact that tribe, and that the whole Bible is translated into their language, and there's schools and churches and leadership training, and now, like I said, they're reaching more remote tribes.
Incredible.
They're wearing clothes.
How long, do you remember how long it took for them to be able to, let's say from when your dad said, I feel like God wants us to reach this tribe, to actually get in and be able to share the gospel?
That was several years. Yeah.
And they would attempt to go every how often? Do you know? Like once
Somebody
a
was
month,
there
or-
all the time in the hut. It was kind of dangerous, honestly. For a while, they thought the tribal people were afraid of water, so there was a pond type thing there, and they built a house on stilts in the pond. But eventually, they found out that they weren't afraid of water. They could swim, but they didn't know that at the time. They thought they were safe, and then they lived there. Mom was out there with him several times for 3 months at a time, and got pictures of her cooking, up in that little hut on water. But then when they got out on the airstrip, no women went out there. But they just made a rotation because there was quite a few missionaries by that time.
Wow.
And then some of the older teenage boys, like my brother and some of his friends.
It should be a big adventure again. Let me
tell you.
Life. Your brother's really.
I know, and he started the Tribal Aid Foundation in '97 and went out in Venezuela for a long time until the government won't let him come anymore. And now he's doing solar panels in Colombian medical clinics, remote villages there.
So
In
he's
fact,
still involved as well.
yeah, it's a non-religious.
Okay.
But Jim's been going with him, and because he needs a technician type person. And Jim's really not, but he can fix anything and figure stuff out. So they're going again in January. So Randy's not allowed to preach the gospel when he goes to this certain tribe.
Yeah.
So Jim and my dad was 90 at the time, went to the other tribe where you can preach the gospel. And they did solar panels there for their medical clinics because there's no electricity up there. And they rode donkeys. My dad climbed up the mountain, and
At
rode
90.
At 90. And then when he got back from the last trip, he said, "I'm not going anymore." And we're like, "No, you're not."
I'm guessing you had pets, maybe.
Yes, we did.
Make some pets when you were out there as a kid? What would something extravagant maybe be?
Well, we had a sloth for a while.
Oh.
Randy kept some baby alligators in his room in a wash tub, and we'd go in there and throw food in there, and they'd be.
When you say a wash tub, you're probably meaning like just a little basin.
No, it was
you mean
like a big tub, like you used to wash clothes in.
Okay.
You probably don't remember that.
A deeper one.
Yeah, it was deep.
Okay.
And then I don't know what he did with them when they got too big for that, but
He'd just catch them and bring them in.
yeah,
Like they were toads, only they weren't toads.
they weren't toads.
Yeah.
They're snapping alligators. So we found out that one of the tribal people had killed an ocelot. The ocelot fur was very valuable. So they would kill it, and you could get $20 for an ocelot fur. Wow. And that was a lot of money for them. So they killed a mother, and then they brought the baby into the village, and they were playing with it, and he was 5 days old, or looked like it.
Goodness.
They would throw him up in the air and let him land on his head because they figured he was going to die anyway. It was terrible. And so I went out there and I saw what they were doing, and I said, "I will give you something very nice for this ocelot, this baby ocelot." No, it's going to die. The mother's dead. That's okay. We can feed it, something. And so I got some fishing hooks and some thread and some cloth. I don't remember what else, and I gave it to him. I said, "Okay, here. Now I want the ocelot." So, they were happy. It's going to die anyway. You just lost all your stuff here. So we fed it. My whole family would help me with him. And, he was small. Then he kept getting a little bit bigger, of course. And he loved to suck my finger. I put it in his mouth like this. And because I guess he just didn't have that nursing.
Yeah.
So even when he got big, that was a little thing he liked to do.
It was like his comfort or something.
Yeah. And so I took him down to the river at night and bathed him because he smelled kind of bad. He liked fresh meat. And we kept him in a cage beside the house. And then I would let him in the house sometimes, and he would walk around and pounce on people. I mean, he was a wild animal,
But he was tame.
He was tamed, and it was under control.
How big did he get to be?
He got they're not huge, but it's way bigger than a cat,
30 pounds maybe?
Yeah, probably. Yep. Wow. But I'd scrub him down at the river, and he hated that.
But he let you do it.
Yeah. Yep. We started early, and then one night I took him for a little walk outside around the village. It was in the evening. Everybody
Did
was.
you have like a collar?
Well, we had just a rope, But then at one point there was a mother hen and 10 little peeps.
Oh.
And I didn't realize he was a wild animal until he came on those peeps and had the head off of all 10 of them in like seconds.
And he pulled you then.
Yeah. And the owner's like, mi pollitos. The lady's like, my chickens.
Yeah.
And so I said, I'll pay you for those.
10.
Just like that.
My goodness.
And so my dad said, Sandy, I need to have a talk with you. That's a wild animal. Dad, I've had him since he was 5 days old. I really love this animal and I don't want to get rid of him. And Smithsonian came through again and they said, I'll give you $500 for that tiger, that ocelot, because his fur was perfect. The ones in the jungle are all beaten up and they fight, but he had never had any fighting and his fur was just beautiful. Mm-hmm. He said, then you can come and see him anytime you want to up at the museum. I'm like, you're not killing my cat.
Yeah.
You know how you are when you're young. I could have used that $500 in college, but then we would travel with him when we would move locations. We'd be in the barge, tied together, and we would put him up in the front in his cage. And Dad, every hour or so, he would just go up, pick up the cage, and put him down into the water to cool him off because he was super hot.
Okay, yeah.
Yeah, so that's how I cooled him off. And then finally, when I went to college, we found a little zoo, a jungle zoo that had toucans and, birds and whatever, snakes. And so they gave me $20 for it. And I would travel back and forth and stop in and see him.
Did he remember you?
He did. I put my finger in the cage. Aww. And he sucked my finger.
Aww.
So.
Did you give him a name?
Tabby.
Tabby.
Tabby. Yeah.
Wow.
So, yeah, he's a great pet.
Well, thank you for sharing that with us.
You're welcome.